Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashraf al-mursaleen. Thank you for coming to this panel tonight. So the topic of resilience has been coming up a lot, especially over the past year and a half, as we've been witnessing the ongoing genocide of our brothers and sisters in Palestine. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give them relief. In addition to all the global and local things that have been happening, in addition to everyone here in this room is dealing with their own personal and individual challenges. So you add all of these things together, and it can create a lot of difficulty for us to be able to cope and function in our everyday life. I don't know about you, but I felt over the last year and a half, my ability to function has been much different than it was prior to that. And we sometimes think, well, isn't resilience that we should just be able to pick ourselves back up and keep going the way we've always been? And that's why today I'm hoping we can have a discussion on what resilience really is and how it can manifest in so many different ways. So to start off, I just want to see if anyone here in the audience wanted to say what they think resilience is. What does it mean to you? You can just shout it out. Yeah, go ahead. Yep, exactly. Continuing to work through something through difficulty. Yep. Yeah, go ahead. Yep, inna ma'al usri yusra. I love that. And we sometimes forget that while we're experiencing a hardship, there's also a lot of ease in our life, but it's so hard to tune into that. And we have to consciously remember all the ease in our life throughout. Yep. Excellent. Yep. Yeah, there you go. The capacity to withstand and cope with difficulties. Yep, at the back there. To stay on your path. Yep, to stay on the path, exactly, despite all the difficulties. Yep, these are all excellent definitions of what it means to be resilient. And if you plug it into Google, it will give you a very similar definition to what the brother mentioned, the ability to cope with adversities and to continue to function in your life. There are other definitions. For example, the literal definition that they have there is like for an object, when it's stretched, to be able to resume its original shape, like an elastic, something that you can stretch it out and then it'll go back to how it was. A lot of definitions mention the word bounce back, that we go through a challenge and then we're able to bounce back and go exactly back to how we used to be. So I always like to just discuss that there are so many different ways that we can be resilient. And we're sometimes very hard on ourselves, where we go through a challenge and then we start thinking, why can't I function the way I'm used to? Why is everything taking me so much longer? Why am I so emotional? But then you look at how resilience doesn't mean we continue on exactly as we were. It means I continue going on while holding all these really difficult emotions because I'm going through something hard, and I get better and better at dealing with life's challenges, because basically when you go through a hardship, you're not only going through something hard, you're actually building your toolbox, right? You know how we all have a toolbox at home to fix things? I know nothing about that. My husband takes care of that. But in terms of our emotional toolbox, so when you go through life, as you go through each challenge, you're actually adding wisdom, insight, perspective, skills to that toolbox that then you use after every time you experience a difficulty. So that's kind of how I look at resilience. It's not necessarily that we don't feel difficult emotions. Like if you look at, for example, think of someone resilient in your life. Kind of just reflect a little bit. Think of somebody who embodies that sense of resilience. It could be some of the beautiful people that we've come to know and love from Gaza that have shown us this concept of resilience. It could be one of your parents who's gone through so many challenges, and as a child you've witnessed them go through these things. Or it could be yourself. What kind of characteristics does a resilient person have? Do they experience emotions, like those difficult emotions, like sadness, fear, anxiety? Yeah, they do, right? Any other characteristics? I have a little list in my head that I'll mention, but I wanted to see if anyone here had any traits that you think a resilient person would have. Yeah, at the back there. Patience. Yeah, patience, absolutely. Yeah. Excellent. Yep. You have to have good problem solving. Yep, for sure. Yep. Trust in God. Yep. Tawakkul. Absolutely. And that's something very unique to us. When you look at the literature on resilience, that's one of the things that's usually missing. they always talk about an internal locus of control, that people who are resilient rely a lot on themselves. But in Islam, we know that we rely on the one who is ultimately in control, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's a huge protective factor for us in terms of our resilience. Yeah.
This has now been brought up twice. Once it's inna ma'al usri yusra, and the other one is trust in God. So people who have difficulties, they don't understand that? Or they don't have that? So this question from my perspective, because now we are suggesting that somebody who has trust in God, they are by default more resilient. Or if we believe that there is something always good at the end that makes us more resilient. Is that true? Okay, so give me an example that if I have lost an arm, what that has to do with my trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Exactly, exactly, please.
I don't know if you're alluding to spiritual bypassing, but I think you can have trust, you can have grief over what you're going through, but you can also have trust in God that He will get you through it. So I think it's the balance of both.
So to me, trust in God is the umbrella that can likely keep you from getting wet. That has nothing to do with when I have to walk through that storm of rain, and the things that are gonna get on me, are gonna make me feel the way they make me feel, the annoyance that comes from it, those are two separate issues. My belief in getting through that hardship should not equate, in my opinion, that somehow I'm less of a religious person or less of a spiritual person. Yeah, that makes it further worse that I'm feeling the way I'm feeling. I am the one going through the hardship, and then everybody looking at me like, what's wrong with you? Why are you doing that? Why are you feeling this way? Right? So that was just my point.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point, because a lot of the time that spiritual aspect, when we're struggling, faith can be a significant protective factor, but it should never be a point of where we start to berate ourselves or shame ourselves at, why am I feeling this way when I'm going through a challenge? And I always take it back to the story of our Prophet ﷺ, who was a perfect model of emotional and social intelligence, and how he was able to cope with difficulties. He felt an immense sadness and grief in his life, and I'm so grateful that in the Sira there's so much documentation about how he expressed this publicly in front of the companions. It wasn't something he expressed privately. He showed the companions intense emotional expressions, because and when we look at his level of faith, it's unmatchable. He got it, and by it I mean this whole story. And he went up in Isra and Mi'raj, and he saw things that we are veiled from us. So his level of faith had nothing to do with his emotional expression. So that's where I think we really just have to have that self-compassion, that when you're going through a hard time, you don't have to have it all figured out at once. You don't have to feel like you need to just keep powering through without taking a moment for yourself to heal and recover from what you went through. So that's why that concept of resilience, sometimes I feel like we need to unpack it a little bit, so that people aren't so hard on themselves when they are struggling and they're having a hard time. It's that you're working towards coping with these things, and you're developing those tools that will help you get through. So every time you go through a challenge, you get better at it. It doesn't shake up your world as much. That's basically what resilience is. You're able to get through these things. So kind of just wanted to define it from that standpoint. And the angle that I was going to take a little bit on this concept of resilience was the importance of our social connectedness. We sometimes feel like resilience means I need to do it all on my own. I can't rely on other people, but that's actually not the case. we're wired for connection. Like, we're social beings. We need to rely on each other. And subhanAllah, in the Sirah, we see so many examples of how the Prophet ﷺ brought people together. Like, that social cohesiveness was integral to the success of this mission and the message being spread. So one example, a very prominent one, is the Hijrah, how the Ansar took care of the Muhajirin. It wasn't that the Muhajirin came and the Ansar said, okay, you're resilient, you've been raised by the Prophet, you figure it out. No, they took them in and they supported them in every way that a person can be supported, right? Financially, physically, emotionally, gave them shelter, helped them adjust to life in Medina. So we see that this is actually this is prophetic. This is part of our sunnah, it's part of our religion, that we are expected to rely on each other when we need it. And that bolsters resilience. So there was a study, and I'll end with this. Some of you may have heard of it, the longest longitudinal study that has ever been done. It's still ongoing. It's been, I think, 85 or 86 years, where it started in the 1930s, where they studied a group of people and followed them throughout their lifespan to figure out what makes people healthy and live the longest. So what do you think was the number one factor that keeps people healthy and live the longest? Social interactions, or social connectedness. Because when you're socially connected, you have so many different types of support all in one, and it's such a huge protective factor. And when you look at, subhanAllah, in our faith, how a lot of the things that we're expected to do in Islam are done in congregation, they're done together. And especially over the last year and a half, I don't know how I would have coped with everything happening in Gaza and in other places in the world if it weren't for our ability to get together and do the demonstrations and the protests and all the things that we did. They were significant factors in how we cope. We're supposed to come together. So that social connectedness is extremely valuable. And when you look at the research, that it's the number one factor that keeps people feeling well, it makes us want to invest more in these relationships. And in Islam, we have this unique foundation for our social belonging, which is loving each other for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That I care for your well-being and I want nothing in return. That I only seek the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that. So we're very blessed that, alhamdulillah, this is a cornerstone of how we're supposed to cope and how we're supposed to function as Muslims. So just to remember that part of resilience is seeking support from those around you. And the last thing I'll mention about people who are resilient, and something that kind of helps me when I'm going through a challenge, is that resilient people accept as they go through life that challenges will happen, right? We go through life with this mindset that we know we will be tested, right? It says it in the Quran. It doesn't mean we're not going to experience difficulty. That's, again, like I said, it's part of this whole process that we feel sad, we feel weighed down, and that's normal and that's human. But that we go through life without this expectation of how things should be, but how things Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has planned for us. So I'll pass it on to Asma.
Okay, assalamu alaikum. I've been asked to basically prepare about the habits of resilient people and what would we actually observe of people who would we define them as resilient. So I went on and I did some research and looked up some actually the most prominent research about resiliency out there. And actually I landed a research by Dr. I believe her name is Lucy Horn. She herself went into the research about resiliency because an incident happened to her. And that incident shaked her world. So basically, she lost her daughter at 12 years old in a car accident. And since she is a researcher, she just decided basically to look up what can I do to equip myself with the right tools to actually to keep on in my journey. So believe it or not, one of the, what you just mentioned, one of the most prominent elements or characteristics of the people who are most resilient is actually accepting the fact adversity, challenges is part of life. And it's not a matter of if it's going to happen, it's when it's happening. So that deep acceptance is rooted in our religion. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Surah Al-Baqarah, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ. I can't remember the whole ayah, but I will say it in English. is you will be, we surely will test you with loss of, with fear and hunger and loss of wealth and soul and fruit. وبشر الصابرين. So because I just can't say it in Arabic, forgive me. But this is basically so what this ayah is telling us is actually adversity is going to hit. It's part of us. It's part of our journey on earth. Now, the interesting thing is the science now is proving that. Is actually the most resilient people that they can keep on in their journey, they're actually accepting this. So this is the first characteristic of the most resilient people, where they have that surrender of accepting adversity. And I'm now going to say what kind of adversity. Adversity is different. We're talking, me and Dr. Makhdoom. Who am I to say this is not actually as tough enough on you? So it could be a simple interaction that could shake your world. A word could shake your world. So actually adversity can come on different levels. So this is number one character. The second one, that actually the people who are more resilient, they showed up with when they actually were able to accept what's within their control. That's the second one. And it's not actually a far concept from us, because we do the same thing. And I would say by focusing on what next, it's about intention and action. Intention and action. It's a practice, we do it all the time. You set your intention and you take an action. Now, the moment that we start sitting down, ruminating about, for example, again, emotions is part of us. And I'm not saying you don't get angry or upset or sad. We will, or shaking or fear. We will go through all of these emotions, and it's only natural. But again, what the science is telling us about emotions, it takes 90 seconds. It takes 90 seconds to go through the emotion. Anything goes beyond the 90 seconds is actually you accepted to entertain the thought about that feeling, and you're sitting with it, and maybe you're ruminating on it. But if you actually just give yourself time, and maybe istighfar, maybe tasbih, maybe making a prayer, you will go through that emotions and it will go away. So what's within my control is probably my intention and my thought and my next action about it. The third element about the most resilient people that they showed is actually, or they practiced, is actually asking themselves a question. Is this thought or behavior is beneficial, or is it harmful? So they're getting themselves in the habit while they are going through what they're going through, difficulties, adversities. Is this thought is beneficial or harmful? Is this behavior is beneficial or harmful? I'm just smiling because yesterday was a tough day for me, for whatever reason, many reasons, but it was a very challenging day. And actually, I choose to binge watching on Netflix. I just went crazy, as if I don't know what happened. But anyway, I'm being basically very transparent here. We do go through this. If you do it, it's okay. But maybe what I just learned, I didn't apply. I can compassionately forgive myself, saying while I was in that behavior, did I ask myself, is this beneficial or harmful for my life and for my akhirah? These are, again, they're not foreign questions for us, because every time we take a behavior, we're supposed to set the intention. Why I'm doing what I'm doing. So this is interesting. Well, I really find it really interesting when I search the topic about adversity and resiliency and even grit, because I went into that, which is really interesting. So I really found that everything I found out there that the science is actually supporting, you will find it in our tradition, which is so beautifully that we actually have and we practice this. So I will leave it there if you guys want to add to that. Actually, I can add more, but I think I'll stop here.
No, I'm having a good time listening, actually. So I'll pass it on to Dr. Makhdoom, and then I'll start entertaining your questions, inshallah. But I have a few questions of my own. Go ahead, Doctor.
So to go back to my earlier question, that was me being facetious. That wasn't questioning anybody's faith or religion. But that was for the sake of that faith and religion and spirituality, to me, is that plank that can keep you afloat when you're in the middle of the sea just dropped by a ship. Something that can still keep you going till your circumstances change. Because the moment you drown, that's the end of everything. Then nothing matters. And that's why resilience has to be seen in the context of how that works for you, how that applies to you. So real life example would be something made out of wax and something made out of lead. Resilience means completely different to the ball of wax and something made out of lead. So let me counter that. And I want you to hear what I'm saying, not jump to what that's going to come across as. So if I'm understanding correctly what you're suggesting, and if I apply to my situation, that I'm dropped off in the middle of an ocean by a ship, can I swim harder to get to the shore? Most likely not. So the answer to my resilience at that point would be to, yes, look for something that can just hold me up. Because there is no equality in that sort of imbalance that I, as a human, can fulfill. That's just not going to happen. And knowing myself, I'm talking about myself. There may be somebody who's just that much good of a swimmer that they can make it happen. I can't. And that's why resilience is the ability to maintain the function. To me, that's what resilience is. Do not just fall apart to the point that you cannot even take care of yourself or the responsibilities that you have or the things that are still around you that you still can benefit from and can benefit other people. That's resilience to me. So, because you can only shape hard metal by putting them through grinding machines. That's the only way you're going to shape it up. That is not a reflection and a negative reflection on the metal or the person who decides to put that through the machine. That's just the process. That's how it's supposed to work. That's what it made to work. And that's where it becomes very tricky, that if you approach this as a social conversation, you're entitled to your opinion. You can say anything you like, any way you want. But I'm bound by a very different set of rules because of my education, my understanding, my practice, that I can only give you more proven, effective, and more logical answers. You don't have to like it. You don't have to agree with it. But you at least have to be willing to do it. That's the only way it's going to work. Otherwise, you and I are just not going to be a good match. I only have diesel to offer, and you are a gas engine. That's it. You can do whatever you want. I am not the one for you. I can't help you because the substance that I'm offering does not work for you. It's no negative reflection on our relationship. us as per people, it's just a mismatch. So your best bet is to plan ahead and make sure that you get to the gas station before you run out of the gas. You can't keep butting your heads with me saying, well, you are here, you have something, why can't you just make this work? Because it's not designed to work that way. So when it comes to resilience, the problem that we see in the real world right now, we are just focusing on the labels and the names a little bit too much. Example, feeling hopeless. Feeling hopeless for a 2-year-old versus a 52-year-old is going to be very different. What can make a 2-year-old feel hopeless is breaking a toy. But for a 52-year-old, feeling hopeless would be losing a job, losing a partner, losing home, a lot of other things that they have worked on to establish themselves to that point. So they started here, and now they're here. So the fall from here, it's not going to be easy. Nothing I can tell you that would make you feel good about that. That's where the concept of religion, spirituality, social connectedness, ability to understand and process comes with, do I understand what it means and what it takes? That when I fall from here, what is going to happen to me down here? Can I build myself up? Everything applies, everything matters. But does that matter in that situation for that person? So that's where I think we can open it up to just questions.
Yeah, I have questions for all of you, actually. So if you would like to scan the QR code, you can go ahead and enter your questions. I'm monitoring them here right now. But I guess I'll ask questions to all of you and just kind of get the conversation started. And I often reflect, actually, about how our rituals as Muslims kind of build in practices for resilience. And I wonder oftentimes, because I see, when we talk about that resiliency study that you were talking about earlier, Randa, about having social interactions, I think we can safely say, in a general way, that women tend to be a little bit better at keeping social interactions stronger into later life? Later life? Yeah, okay. Right, so, and I've often reflected, actually, about the wisdom of having Jum'ah being mandatory for men, so that men often will see each other every week, whether they like it or not, whether they, they're going to stand shoulder to shoulder and toe to toe, whether they enjoy the person next to them or the person behind them, or somebody steps on their head while they're making sujood. Or I've often found that there's a wisdom in having that become mandatory, and I wonder how it plays out into later life, because I know that becomes an issue as children leave homes, and elderly people elderly couples are on their own, and there's a resiliency that tends to stay with women who've built social connections over time, and which tends to drop with older gentlemen. And as we see our community aging, I wonder how you guys have viewed that going into older age. So if you're a middle-aged man, please take note.
Yeah, I think that's a huge component of that healthy aging piece, right? That a lot of our parents are now, I think some of us in that sandwich generation, where we're taking care of our children, and we have our parents, and we want to make sure that they're well and that they're okay. And that's where it becomes increasingly important for them to engage in these social relationships. Alhamdulillah, there's so many activities that are happening, I think, here at Wellness that are helping with that. Like Sada was mentioning, that concept of coming to pray in congregation, it's such a brilliant design that we don't always appreciate really the wisdom behind it, and how even in the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, how when a companion was missing from prayer, he would ask about them. He would notice, like the busiest person in the world that has ever lived, like he would notice when someone wasn't there. That tells you about the cohesiveness of that community, the structure that they built. And he would go ask about them and visit them, and how we have rights upon one another as Muslims, right? That you visit someone when they're sick, you attend their funeral. We have that concept of aza, where for 3 days people are literally holding the family because of how difficult that experience is. So I think it's really important that we encourage, if there's somebody elderly in your life, and that we don't wait till, we're retired to start developing those relationships, because it's a lot harder. We have to start earlier on. It's not too late but it just works a lot better if you start it earlier on. And when you realize that it's the number one factor that keeps people well, it makes it more incumbent on us to invest in these relationships. I think we sometimes it goes on the back burner because life is so busy, like we just don't have enough time. But this is actually what helps a community thrive and become more resilient, in my opinion.
Jazakallah khair. My piece about collectiveness and individualistic communities that we're living on, this is basically the lens I'm going to come with. So we do live in a culture that is individualistic. Is everything about, your achievement, your success, your progress on your own. And our kids and the young generation sitting here, they raise that way at the schools. So for people who are actually migrated, came here later in life, they actually experience more collective culture. So I'm talking about now cultures. It's just individualistic culture and actually collective culture. So can we do both? We can do both. You can still take care of yourself. You can still actually achieve. At the same time, you can actually part of a larger community by actually also having collective goals together and social setting together. As Lorenda mentioned, is just also that really will contribute for your individualistic health of living longer. So it actually can happen. And one part of the initiative I took care of among the women, I run 3 days. It's the wellness, actually, one of the people taking care of advertising about it. In Mac Hyde Park Gym, I do 3 days exercise group. My goal of that group actually was not just so you work out. It's really that social connecting for the sisters to get together, see each other 3 times a week. And this was built and done by design. Because after we came out of COVID, we were actually isolated in our homes. And believe it or not, we're a human of habits. So if you, for 21 days, have a certain habit that you're doing, that's become part of you. So can you imagine through the COVID 2 years with isolation, no coming together, no shaking hands, no kissing, no hugging with our culture? We developed that. We don't check on each other. We don't talk to our neighbors. Plus, the culture that we're living in, we're very isolated. So actually it does contribute on us. Now, going back into the resiliency, part of actually resilient people is the connectedness between people. Because when I see my sister going through struggle, and I learn about her struggle, and I lend a hand, or I lend an advice, or I smile in her face, that where she can feel, when someone give me a smile today, that does play a big influence on you. So I would say proudly, this is part of our religion. Actually, we do things in jama'ah, we pray in jama'ah. If one part ache, the rest of your body ache. That's a hadith of Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. So I think if going back into the more belief, more religion, and it will get you stronger, I think absolutely yes. But you need to dig down into the foundation. So if you want to see how tall is the building, just look down how deep is the foundation. So go dig deep about your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with the sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. If you want to increase that connectedness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and inshallah understanding the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when you go through difficulty and adversity, because it's not if, it's when that will hit you. So that I would add to it. in terms of the collectiveness. These are just my thoughts. I'll pass it on to you, Doctor.
He's good. Actually, I was picking on the men. I'm getting ready for the backlash. I was picking on the men because I find that that's what I'm seeing in the older generation. Yeah, I have boys, but also there are other pockets of isolation. I think, and you've both touched on them, as because we all come from communities that may come from elsewhere. So people who are coming from elsewhere, but also even in our modern era, the epidemic of loneliness is something that we are talking about even at the policy level, which is now like an issue of concern for governments. So it's touching everyone. I was picking on the men, sorry, earlier. I'm just preempting the backlash, or new moms, for example, right? But I'll let Dr. Makhdoom deal with the rest of the aging men.
So I think it wouldn't be a surprise if I were to say that I don't believe this has much to do with age or gender. Because if 5 feet, 90 pounds girl, if she has all the right skills, if she has all the right habits, can fight the fight appropriate for her age and size, much better than a 6'2" and 300-pound guy. Just think of it that way, that what is needed? What is it actually the function or the purpose that we are supposed to serve? And that's why we have to go back to the basics. We have not helped the next generations by giving them the handheld devices. We will pay the price. We are paying the price. It is not going to go well in 15, 20 years' time, and AI is just gonna kill the remaining brain cells. Just marks this somewhere and keep it safe and come back to it if we all are here in 20 years. How inept, inadequate, irresponsible people we are gonna have to deal with, we will all see.
Maybe you should elaborate a little bit on
Yes.
how, what it is that handheld devices, for example, does to someone and does to their resiliency. Maybe you share with us that.
Sure. So resiliency, if we, again, grasp the concept that I am what I'm made of, not what I look like from the outside. What goes inside of me to make me who am I? That's my upbringing, that's my nutrition, that's my physical stamina, that's my education applied to learn and practice and grow from it. Not just having a book of something. Do I read, then understand, then apply things that work, I do better at, things that don't work, then I either figure out that is this something I needed and I need to get better at, or this is not for me, and move on. That's what's going to make the difference. We have made this artificial temporary world much more real for the younger generation. We have taken out the concept of what is it that you need to do? How is it that you can make it easier and better for yourself? Not about what everybody else is doing and what is wrong, because we can never control that. There would always be somebody. There would always be something that's not going to be right. That's that. But am I just gonna keep beating my head with it? Or I'm gonna go around it, because that's just not for me. I need to move. I need to get through this. So the acknowledgement and the acceptance has to be the bare minimum. You have to say that, yes, I lost the arm, it's gone. There's nothing I can do to get that arm back. That's the only way that I am going to seek the right kind of help. That do I need a prosthesis, an arm, that serves 50% of the function. And it still can make things 50% easier or better, versus it happened, it's gone. There's nothing I can do about it. That's the difference. That's where we are lacking. And social connectedness basically is learning from the wisdom and experience of other people. How are we ever going to foresee what life looks like from a different angle when we have just never been there? How am I going to just tell you, just wait, it's going to be fine? It's not going to work. It's not going to go very far.
Perfect. I'm going to touch on this social connectedness. So I'm actually going to go back to our very first problem, our very first question. And this is actually something I think we've all heard in the community, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. We have one question. I'm waiting for a few more to come in, and I'll give them to you. But it's this idea that if you, and I'll back up so I can see all of your faces now, because I want to see all of your faces. If you struggle with if you struggle with being resilient, if you struggle in terms of how you respond to a crisis, or how you recover to a crisis, or to what you perceive as adversity, that there's something wrong with your faith, that you have weak iman. I'm sure everybody has. Okay, let's just do a quick survey, because that's what I love to do. All right, how many of you have heard this discussion before? That if you are struggling with something, that someone tells you, well, you want to check your iman. You don't have enough tawakkul. Just raise your hand if you've heard that before. You see, it's fairly prominent, right? Yeah, we've all heard that. I would love to hear your thoughts on how to deal with that idea, because it's certainly not true, right? People of iman will struggle, will go up and down. We know we will be tested. We know we have to tap into wisdom. We have to acknowledge that it's coming. How do we respond with that to that kind of idea and that culture that exists within our community?
So, and it honestly hurts my heart to hear that this many people have heard that. And I hope you didn't hear it at a moment where you were feeling really vulnerable and down. So honestly, I just keep going back to our Islamic traditions. And even if you look outside of our trajectory from Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, all the other prophets who were tested beyond our imagination in terms of the trials that they had in their lives, that they experienced really hard things, and they felt, and it's mentioned in the Quran, like Sayyidina Yaqub, he lost his eyesight from sadness. Like it says it right there in the Quran. And these are people at another level of faith. So if anyone ever says that to me, the first thing I just go back to our Islamic traditions, and how there was a whole year termed the year of sadness in the Prophet's life, alayhi salatu wassalam, how after the incidents of At-Ta'if, when you read about it, how after, what a traumatic incident, how the Prophet ﷺ, it mentions how he walked for quite a while until he reached an area between Ta'if and Mecca, and the narrations say that he wasn't really aware of how he even got there. He was in a state of shock, right? And he mentioned even years later that was the hardest day of his life. And this was, again, a level of iman that we can't even relate to, right, in terms of what he had. So for me, your faith, kind of like what Dr. Makhdoom said, I look at our faith as it's our crash mat. It's the place we land when we fall. But it doesn't mean that we can't fall. It doesn't mean that we're not going to sometimes break apart a little bit, and then we put ourselves back together. Faith is a thing that helps us put ourselves back together, but it doesn't mean we're not allowed to experience those really hard emotions. So from my perspective, that's kind of how I answer that your faith is not a measure of that suffering that you're having, that you can be a person of very high faith and spirituality, and you can go through something really difficult, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows how difficult it is for you. So I feel like that's where we just need to be really careful with that.
Okay. Life coach hat. This is what I'm going to say something. Listen, between hopelessness and hope is a good night's sleep. Or a meal. Thank you. So that's, again, I like to, because we know the wisdom. I know all of you guys know what we just shared here. It's about how you apply it. Really, The wisdom is out there. The knowledge is out there. Just chat GPT. What's resilience will give you everything, and you will be you don't need to be here. Just go home. But really, it's about how you apply the wisdom that you're hearing. So for me, like when I've been told, like someone is coming and telling me, oh, it's your faith, well, I dig again deep on my foundations. What's my protocol? You need to know your protocol. Whether you're aware of it or you're not aware of it, you run it without knowing because your basal ganglia is running it. But sometimes if you design your protocol, so that protocol can take you to a better place, that's where you are in charge. That's where you're leading. That's when you bounce, not back, you bounce forward in terms of resiliency. So again, I go double down on your foundation. If you feel down, seek help. And what do I mean by foundation? Actually, I'm going to spell it. So I think you guys know all that serotonin is produced 90% in your guts, not in your brain. And it's like a substance for the brain function. So again, I feel down, I feel sad, I feel I can't lift myself up. I hit hard in life, but I can't get myself back to function normal. Double down on your foundations. How's your eating? How's your movement? How you're sleeping? How's your focus? How's your iman? Because these are the 5 things I consider them under energy. Like if I look at my energy, I just look at those 5 elements. So I'm not, when I say self-care, again, I never say self-care is the spa and the candles, and that's not self-care. Self-care is discipline. Self-care, did you get yourself out there and got your 30 minutes walk? Because the world we're living in, it's designed not to walk. London is designed to actually have a car and travel in cars. So you have actively to find opportunities to get yourself moving. So that's taking care of my foundations in terms of movement. Now, a movement, Dr. probably Makhdoom knows, when I move, the muscles release some I want to call them. Yeah, exactly. That actually helps you to feel happier, not just happier. It will actually allow you to think more creativity. So again, understanding how these foundations can help you, this is what you can tap on. That's what you can actually do. Now, unfortunately, if someone tells you questioning your iman, you should question their advice. I just will leave it there.
Let me put the fear in everybody's head about this resilience. It's not in the moment when you're facing the barrel of the gun that resilience matters. Resilience mattered when you didn't even come into conception yet. What it takes to conceive, go through the process, deliver the child, and then have that child get back to nothing again. That's resilience. That's the process. So if that unfortunate mother was living in an unfortunate situation and was experiencing a lot of bad things, that is what needs to be understood before we can address with that child what their iman should be, what their understanding should be, what their resilience should be, because that's their building block. If somebody is missing that piece, I have no ground to stand on to even suggest what should work for them or what should they be doing. I need to understand the person. I need to treat them as a person. I need to know them as a person. So what that does and brings that individual to that time of stress and how they get through that stress is crisis. Is now and deal with this because you still have to save your life to be able to move forward and see what you learned from it, what it did to you, what it did for you, and then work on those things. That's why I have personal issue with people using a lot of language without the substance to it. When they don't understand what disrespect can do to a human mind, what the disregard to your basic needs can make you feel like, and what that would translate into all your bodily functions, then we're just wasting time. Because I don't know how far I'm gonna go, when is the end, and that's why I'm not expected, in my understanding, to make anything look better or different. My part is just my attempt, my understanding, my ability to function. So think about this, and it's not a good or a bad thing. You are the only person that matters. Nothing else matters. Because at the end, it'll be just you. Nobody is gonna care where you came from and who you lived with and who blah, blah, blah. It will be you. So take care of you. If you take care of you, that's how you take care of anybody else.
Perfect. Okay, that brings some of our questions. Perfect. No, it's good. Jazakallah khair. Okay, so Jazakallah khair, that's perfect. I'm taking away from this. I have a lot of other questions that I could keep asking you. We keep going all day, but I want to make sure everyone gets an opportunity. But I love this point about forgiving oneself. Very important in being able to respond to the next crisis. So someone here has asked, sharing videos of Gaza or watching people in Gaza dying and some very graphic images has affected their mental health, but they feel guilty to not watch, which I find interesting, and that they want to know how to cope with that.
So I
Fire
think-
burns.
Go
Sorry.
ahead. No, go ahead.
Fire is designed to burn. Are you wrong for keeping away from fire? You need to know. Something that doesn't work for you, stay away from it. There is no reason to put yourself what everybody else expects of you or what everybody else sees as good deed if you can't do it.
Yeah, and just to add to that, and we've talked about this in other talks here at the masjid, that a lot of us, I would say maybe, yeah, all of us have been experiencing the secondary trauma, right? So when you're looking at these things that are very, very challenging and at these atrocities that our Muslim brothers and sisters are experiencing, the brain sometimes experiences that same sensation as if you're going through that trauma, as if you're going through that difficulty yourself. So you're actually, that re-traumatization every time you open up and you watch a video and you watch these pictures, it doesn't always serve us in terms of being able to serve the purpose, because what happens is we can start to become debilitated. So our nervous system starts to respond as if we're the ones under threat. It's very hard for our brains to differentiate whether is it me that this is happening to or is it not. So the way I look at it, and I've struggled to find that balance too this year. It's very, very difficult to find that balance. You want to stay informed, but you don't want to stay informed in a way that's going to paralyze you. So it's about being intentional and purposeful, right? So when you're scrolling on your phone, do you know, like, is this going to be a good time? Because it will show up, these things as you're going through your socials or things that are sent to you on WhatsApp. Is this a good time for me to check this? I always say, like, is it just before you go into a work meeting? Is it just before an exam? Just before you walk in the house after, being away all day and your kids want to spend all this time with you? But your brain will still be responding, and your body will physiologically keep responding to those images and videos. So, and I think if we're watching too much, our nervous system might get to the point of freezing, where we actually become numb and desensitized, which is never where we want to be when we see these videos. These are real human beings, people who are putting their life on the line to get these images out into the world. So I know we sometimes feel bad, like I have to see it all, I have to watch it all. But what is that doing to you? And how are you going to be able to help your brothers and sisters if you're feeling so debilitated? So I say it's not about having to read everything or watch everything. There are some things out there that I've watched and I've seen, and I will never forget. like they haunt me. I will never be able to get those images or videos out of my mind, especially what's happening in Syria and the horrific stories of torture that people have been through that are coming out right now. We have to be very careful because you might see something or watch something that will make you completely kind of debilitated for the rest of the day. So I say that we're not expected to keep up with absolutely everything. Stay informed enough to be involved and active in terms of supporting our brothers and sisters, not to the extent where it's going to put you in a really bad position emotionally.
I can totally relate to the brother or sister who shared about feeling guilty, not watching. So it's normal. You're not alone. We all have been there. But at the same time, alhamdulillah, Allah blessed us with the aql, with the mind. And alhamdulillah, I think most people in this room are relatively like on a level of education. They can understand when they are consistently looking at these images and these news, what do they do to their nervous system? Like, I'm assuming, like I don't want to go in details about what's happening to your nervous system, but your nervous system basically consistently in fight and flight. That's why it is. And this is when you're not giving your system any time to rest. So again, we function, we need to isolate. We need to go up and down. That's the healthy. I'm not saying all the time you're happy and nothing happening, but that's healthy to have up and down, up and down. So if you are in a habit, and that's again, if you're in a habit, waking up in the first thing in the morning and going to the news, I just want to let you know, we did not evolve that way. Like this is only in the past 5 years. Even we don't know what the research will tell us about our behaviors and how our nervous system is responding based on our behavior using the Instagram in the past 5 years. The data is not here. It's like vaping. It's cool, it's easier. Don't smoke, take a vape, right? But we don't know the consequence yet till the data comes after 10, 15 years. So it's the same thing. So please be mindful using the phones, accessing this news. It's important to connect to other brothers, sisters. It's important to know, but there's other ways that you can know, you can help, and you can contribute. But believe me, not by you being sick. And again, I just shared with you earlier what I did yesterday. I was numbing myself consistently over the TV, binge watching, because I wanted to check out mentally, because I was on the news in the morning. And what happened to my house, I have 4 kids. They've been observing their mom only being, example 5, thank you. Khalid was not around. Well, he was complaining. He kept saying, oh, Asma, come on. And I'm like, you still here? And I'm like, I'm still on the couch. So please don't interfere. But I couldn't check myself out from that behavior because an earlier decision I made to actually watch and basically really fire my brain. At that I was checked out for the day. I just needed to sleep. So I'm saying that and I'm sharing that, not just to share it for the sake. I'm sharing that because I just want you to know if you're doing the behavior I'm doing, actually this is also a lot of other people are doing it for different reasons. Not because the war of Gaza. There's other elements in their life, they're engaging with such behaviors and really this is not healthy for you. Alhamdulillah. Now, understanding and knowing, start in the morning, have your protocol. The difficult the day is, the more you need to stick with your protocol. But you won't know unless you design that protocol. And if you don't design it, someone else will design that protocol for you. So زي ما بيقولوا the soccer, they play offense, not defense. Right? That's how, yes. The routine. Exactly.
I think the time that needs to be spent and is the most valuable commodity is getting to know yourself. That's how you can establish, because there is no one size that fits all. And it's not a secret or a surprise that misery likes company. Nobody wants to hear what they're doing wrong or what they need to improve on or what they need to change. It's uncomfortable. So I would rather sit with somebody who says, oh, everything is great. Don't worry about anything. Yes, because I don't want to see myself in the mirror in that moment. And there is time for that. Do that. But then you have to take the accountability or the responsibility that where are you going to find time to debrief with yourself? What just happened? How was I feeling before I walked in that room and I just tore everybody apart because they were doing something wrong? What was it that may have had happened the morning before, the night before, the day before? What reminded me that this is the worst thing on the face of the earth? That's my experience. That's my automatic connection with whatever that was. This has nothing to do with even those people who I just yelled at and imparted all kinds of wisdom. And they all are like, we don't even know you. We didn't even ask for it. So you can go back to where you came from because this is not working for us. This is not helpful for us. And we don't really need any format of this is what needs to happen, this is how it needs to happen, because we don't know that till we learn, try, and experience that. Childbirth is an example that anybody can apply and learn from. That you don't have any clue what that feels like, what that does to the person, what happens after. Do I want to engage in that conversation? No. It's not going to benefit anybody. That is somebody's experience. They need to work through that.
I'm sure we could we could brief you. No, I'm just kidding.
Yes.
I'm just kidding. Okay, there's just a few minutes left before Aisha. So unless there's questions in the room, I'm looking at you. If you have questions in the room, we'll come to you with Mike. But otherwise, we'll do some rapid fire. Is there a question? I saw a hand up. No, okay. So Randa, then Asma, then Dr. Makhdoom. So Randa, how do we support people who are lacking resilience without impacting our own mental health?
We have to make sure that when we're involved in their care that we develop not just that empathy, which is trying to feel what they're feeling, but that compassion, which is taking it a step further, which is I see your pain and I'm going to try and help you get out of it instead of me being immersed in that pain, because now there's two people stuck in a situation that need a third person to come help them out.
Oh, that's a very good distinction. Okay, excellent. Perfect. Asma, can you give an example of the 90-second emotion experience?
I like that, sure. So I would say I ask my child to get off his computer and he refuses, you know. Now, the fear inside me of him not listening to me got me frustrated. So I actually stomping towards his room, you know. So again, that's happening and I'm just going about to yell, okay? But then if I stop myself and I say, okay, behavior, would this be beneficial or would this be harmful? What I'm about to do, would that be beneficial or harmful? And just stop there taking a breath and few seconds, 4 or 5 seconds, it depends on you. Hold and then exhale and then go out to inside the room and talk to that child. So you give yourself that time to do the 90 seconds till you guys discharge from that emotion.
So like a 90-second buffer.
Kind of.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Yeah. And Dr. Makhdoom, the last question will go to you, and then I'll close very quickly before Aisha, inshallah. If someone is struggling to function, how can we help them, and where would we find help outside of, individuals, like peer-to-peer?
So that depends, again, what the effect on that person's functioning, their ability to process information, their ability to even use the skills or the strategies that they already know. That's the sort of general idea that you need to know what the person is struggling with or what their difficulty is to be able to suggest anything. Uh, but in terms of, I'm assuming it's coming from the idea of that somebody has, I don't know, OCD or somebody has major depressive disorder and they are struggling, so where to guide them or direct them. So there are resources, there are published resources that you can look into. So Canadian Mental Health Association, your local hospital, different counseling agencies. But it all depends on what the need is. It's not always us telling somebody what to do. Sometimes it's taking them to where they need to be and hoping that they would follow through. We can't just decide, again, this is a key factor that keep coming up, that we feel the way we feel, and we are responding to our reaction to what we just heard or saw, taking the person in question completely out of it. It does not matter anymore why that person came to me. I am so upset, I am so, I don't know, sad, anxious, that this is what I need. So that's not what is most effective. If we can keep that part separate, you can hear, you can see, and then you can come up with a reasonable support, because you are also not, again, unless you are trained and have the qualifications, then do whatever it takes.
Jazakallah khairan. That's all the time we have. Jazakallah khairan. We're going to pray Aisha. Honorable mentions to Dr. Hankir, who was meant to be with us this evening, but unfortunately fell ill. So keep him in your dua, inshallah. Rabbana yashfi. Jazakallah khairan. If you have any questions, we'll keep the QR code there. You can post them and I will share them with the team. Make dua for our local activists and therapists and the people who help us through our mental health crisis. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum.
Okay, you're good. Just keep it clipped. Is it on or off? No, I'll take care of it.
It was literally on 2 seconds.
What was it? It was another one.
Oh, okay. الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله. لا إله إلا الله. استووا. استووا استقيموا. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين